How much did you spend on plants, seeds, and soil amendments last year? Take that number and multiply it by 20. That's what the average gardener spends over 2 decades on recurring inputs. But there's a hidden category of perennials that nurseries focus less attention on because they reduce future sales opportunities. These 7 varieties not only survive without annual replacement, they actively multiply through division, creating exponential value that compounds year after year. The initial investment pays for itself within the first few growing seasons, then generates pure savings for the remaining years. Yet most gardeners never calculate the true cost of their annual planting patterns. Behind these patterns lies a carefully structured system that maximizes recurring revenue from homeowners. Seeds and starter plants typically consume the largest portion of yearly garden budgets, often ranging into the hundreds of dollars for moderate-sized properties. Soil amendments, specialized fertilizers, and replacement costs for failed plantings add substantial additional expenses that accumulate season after season. These recurring expenses can total significant amounts over 2 decades of traditional gardening practices. Consider a conservative estimate of $500 annually in garden inputs. Over 20 years, this approaches $10,000 in total expenditure, not accounting for inflation or the tendency to expand garden areas over time. The nursery industry operates on business principles that naturally favor high-turnover products. Walk through any commercial nursery during peak season and observe the strategic merchandising layout. The most prominent displays showcase vibrant annuals and tender perennials positioned at eye level near entrance areas. Marigolds, impatiens, and petunias occupy premium real estate with attractive pricing designed to encourage purchases. These plants deliver immediate gratification through abundant blooms and saturated colors. Meanwhile, hardy perennials often remain in back sections or specialized areas with minimal promotion. The economic impact becomes clear when examining revenue pattern. A single daylily purchase might satisfy a customer's needs for that garden section permanently, while also providing material for future expansion through division. This contrasts with annual purchases that guarantee return customers seeking replacements each growing season. This business model extends beyond individual plant longevity to encompass entire garden ecosystems. Annuals require specific soil conditions, intensive fertilization schedules, and frequent replacement cycles that generate multiple revenue opportunities throughout each growing season. Nurseries benefit from this dependency through equipment sales, soil amendment products, pest control materials, and seasonal consultation services. Commercial agricultural operations demonstrate an alternative approach through their infrastructure investment strategies. Large-scale perennial crop producers prioritize long-term plantings and soil building programs that reduce input costs while improving productivity over extended time frames. These operations understand that initial capital expenditures on permanent plantings generate superior returns compared to annual replacement cycles. The economic transformation occurs through switching from operational expense models to capital investment approaches. Instead of treating garden plants as consumable products requiring annual replacement, the perennial strategy treats initial plant purchases as infrastructure investments that appreciate through natural processes and reduced input requirement. Commercial perennial operations achieve cost per plant figures that drop dramatically after establishment period. A perennial planting that costs $25 initially might eliminate annual replacement expenses entirely, while generating additional plants through natural division processes. This multiplication effect creates returns that compound over decades rather than depleting resources through recurring purchases. The dependency cycle includes hidden cost escalation patterns built into annual gardening approaches. Inflation affects seed prices, soil amendments, and fertilizer costs annually, creating automatic price increases that gardeners absorb without question. Additionally, failed plantings often trigger premium replacement purchases as gardeners seek supposedly superior varieties to avoid repeat failures. Professional landscaping operations recognize these economic realities and structure their business models around perennial installations that minimize long-term maintenance requirements while maximizing initial project values. The most successful commercial operators focus on establishing self-sustaining garden systems that require minimal ongoing intervention after establishment periods. The financial mathematics become compelling when calculating true cost per year figures for different planting approaches. Annual systems maintain consistent expense levels throughout their operational lifespans, while perennial investments concentrate costs up front, then generate decreasing annual expenses as plants mature and multiply naturally. Breaking this dependency cycle requires understanding which perennial varieties offer the highest multiplication rates combined with the lowest input requirements. The goal shifts from managing annual replacement cycles to building productive garden infrastructure that generates increasing value over extended timeframes. This fundamental change transforms gardening from a recurring expense category into a wealth-building strategy that delivers measurable returns while creating sustainable garden ecosystems. The key lies in recognizing that certain perennial varieties function as something far more valuable than simple landscape plants. These biological systems operate through systematic division processes that generate multiple new plants from single initial purchases. This multiplication principle transforms individual plant investments into exponential value creation that compounds over extended time frame. Each division cycle doubles or triples available plant material, creating wealth accumulation patterns that mirror compound interest calculations in traditional financial markets. Division rates determine the speed at which perennial investments multiply into valuable plant inventories. Most high-performance varieties can be split into multiple plants every 2 to 3 years, with each division becoming an independent plant capable of further subdivision. This creates cascading multiplication effects, where single purchases generate dozens of separate plants within relatively short establishment periods. The mathematical progression follows predictable patterns based on documented division rates. A $25 daylily typically divides into 6 to 8 plants after 3 years of establishment growth. Each of these divisions develops independent root systems and crown structures that enable further splitting within another 2 to 3 year cycle. Through systematic division management, single plants can generate 10 to 20 plants within a decade. Commercial propagators exploit this multiplication principle to build entire nursery inventories from minimal initial stock investments. Professional operations understand that aggressive root systems and natural crown formation tendencies determine which varieties offer the highest multiplication rates. These characteristics enable frequent divisions while maintaining plant vigor and establishment success rates that justify the systematic approach. Traditional annuals offer zero multiplication potential. Each plant completes its life cycle within single growing seasons, then dies and requires complete replacement. This creates negative return scenarios where every dollar invested disappears annually without generating any multiplication value. The contrast becomes stark when comparing long-term investment outcomes between annual and perennial approaches. Root system architecture determines division success and multiplication rates. Varieties with fibrous, spreading root networks divide more easily than plants with single taproot structures. Multiple crown formation creates natural separation points that enable clean divisions without damaging essential plant tissues. These biological characteristics function like natural manufacturing specifications that determine production capacity for each variety. Hemerocalis exemplifies high multiplication perennial varieties through rapid crown division capabilities. Research documents that single plants develop into 8 to 12 divisions within 4 years when managed systematically. The crown structures separate cleanly at natural junction points, creating independent plants with established root systems that transplant successfully without extended recovery periods. Rudbeckia demonstrates dual multiplication strategies through both division and prolific self-seeding behavior. The root systems divide easily while simultaneously producing abundant seed that creates spontaneous new plants throughout garden areas. This combination generates planned divisions plus unexpected bonus plants that accelerate overall multiplication rates beyond controlled division schedules. Monarda spreads through underground rhizome networks that enable extensive division opportunities. The spreading root systems create multiple separation points where individual plants can be extracted without disturbing neighboring sections. This rhizomatous growth pattern generates numerous division opportunities from single initial plantings within 5 5-year timeframes. The selection criteria focus on varieties with aggressive but manageable spreading characteristics. Plants must demonstrate vigorous growth rates while maintaining containable expansion patterns that prevent unwanted garden invasion. The balance between rapid multiplication and controlled growth determines which varieties offer optimal investment characteristics for systematic wealth-building strategies. Commercial timing protocols maximize division success rates and plant establishment percentages. Spring divisions allow full growing seasons for root development before winter stress periods. Fall timing suits varieties that benefit from cool weather establishment phases. Proper timing coordinates with natural growth cycles to ensure maximum survival rates that protect multiplication investments. Division techniques determine actual multiplication outcomes through proper root system management and crown separation methods. Each division requires adequate root material and growing points to establish independently. Poor technique reduces multiplication rates significantly by creating weak divisions that fail to establish or require extended recovery periods before additional divisions become possible. Systematic multiplication transforms gardening from recurring expense management into strategic investment vehicles that generate increasing returns over time. The exponential growth patterns create compound benefits, where initial investments multiply into valuable plant collections worth hundreds of dollars within single decades. Varieties like Hemerocallis, Rudbeckia, and Monarda achieve substantial divisions within 5 years through systematic splitting approaches. This multiplication rate establishes perennial investments as legitimate wealth-building strategies that outperform traditional annual replacement cycles by generating geometric returns instead of recurring expenses. The mathematical advantage becomes undeniable when comparing multiplication potential against annual replacement costs. Single perennial purchases that multiply into dozens of plants eliminate recurring replacement expenses while simultaneously creating surplus value through excess plant production. Yet multiplication represents only one component of the total cost transformation that occurs when transitioning from annual to perennial garden systems. The deeper transformation occurs through systematic elimination of recurring input costs that drain garden budgets year after year. Annual gardens operate like industrial assembly lines, requiring constant input streams to maintain production levels. Traditional gardening demands regular tilling operations that break soil structure every spring, followed by extensive soil amendment applications to restore fertility depleted by constant disturbance. Fertilizer schedules intensify throughout growing seasons as shallow-rooted plants exhaust available nutrients within weeks of establishment. These input requirements compound as gardeners chase declining performance with increasing interventions. Irrigation systems designed for shallow annual roots consume massive volumes of water while failing to build long-term soil moisture retention capacity. Pest control applications escalate as disturbed soil ecosystems lose natural predator populations that normally regulate harmful insect populations. Most gardeners never calculate the cumulative expense of these recurring inputs, treating each category as isolated maintenance costs rather than recognizing the systematic financial extraction occurring through annual replacement cycles. Specialized soil amendments and fertilizer applications add substantial recurring expenses that multiply across growing seasons. Established perennial root systems penetrate soil layers that remain completely inaccessible to shallow annual plants. These deep root networks extract nutrients and moisture from subsoil zones extending 3 to 4 feet below surface levels, accessing mineral resources unavailable to plants with 12-inch root systems. This underground infrastructure reduces fertilizer requirements substantially while simultaneously improving overall soil nutrient cycling efficiency. The extensive root architecture functions like underground manufacturing networks that process raw soil materials into bioavailable nutrients. Perennial roots form symbiotic relationships with soil microorganisms that enhance nutrient uptake capacity far beyond what artificial fertilizer applications can achieve. These biological partnerships create self-sustaining fertility cycles that eliminate dependency on external input applications. Irrigation demands decrease dramatically once perennial root systems establish their deep soil penetration network. Research confirms that established perennials can tolerate drought conditions that would devastate annual plantings. The extensive underground infrastructure accesses groundwater reserves and moisture storage zones that sustain plants through extended dry periods without surface watering requirements. Annual tilling requirements disappear entirely when perennial root systems establish permanent soil structure improvements. The continuous root presence prevents soil compaction, while organic matter from root turnover builds soil structure naturally. This biological tillage occurs continuously without mechanical disturbance, creating superior soil conditions compared to annually tilled systems. Many perennial varieties produce chemical compounds that function as natural pesticide systems, deterring harmful insects through aromatic oils and alkaloid production. Varieties like Monarda, Rudbeckia, and Russian sage demonstrate natural pest resistance, documented in commercial growing operations. These built-in defense mechanisms eliminate recurring pesticide application costs while providing more effective pest control than external chemical treatments. Perennial ground cover systems suppress weed growth through multiple mechanisms that prove far more effective than annual plantings. Dense root networks outcompete weeds for soil nutrients, while extensive foliage coverage blocks sunlight from reaching weed seedlings. This biological weed suppression eliminates herbicide application costs and reduces manual weeding labor to minimal maintenance levels. The systematic elimination of input costs occurs across multiple expense categories simultaneously when transitioning from annual to perennial systems. Annual seed and starter plant purchases disappear completely. Fertilization schedules reduce from frequent applications to occasional supplemental feeding during establishment periods only. Intensive irrigation system operation costs drop substantially as deep root networks access natural moisture sources. Pest control treatment expenses decrease dramatically through natural resistance mechanisms. Commercial agricultural operations demonstrate the economic superiority of perennial systems through their infrastructure investment strategies. Large-scale growers prioritize permanent plantings that reduce operational expenses while improving productivity metrics over extended timeframes. These operations understand that initial capital investments in perennial infrastructure generate superior long-term returns compared to annual input-dependent systems. The transition from annual to perennial systems reduces ongoing input costs substantially while delivering superior garden performance through improved plant health and reduced maintenance requirements. These operational savings compound over decades, generating substantial contributions to total cost reduction beyond plant replacement expense elimination. The cumulative savings from input cost elimination create cascading financial benefits that extend far beyond simple plant replacement calculations. Each eliminated expense category generates annual savings that multiply across decades of garden operation, contributing significantly to the total economic advantage of perennial investment strategies. However, not all perennials deliver equal returns on investment. Specific varieties demonstrate exceptional multiplication capabilities while requiring minimal, ongoing inputs, creating the foundation for truly transformative garden economics. 7 specific perennial varieties demonstrate the multiplication capabilities and minimal input requirements that transform garden economics. These biological powerhouses share critical characteristics that make them superior investment vehicles: aggressive but controllable spreading patterns, straightforward division processes, adaptability across diverse growing conditions, and consistent market demand from knowledgeable gardeners. Hemerocallis, commonly known as daylilies, functions as the ultimate biological manufacturing system for perennial multiplication. Crown division capabilities enable single plants to generate multiple separate divisions within establishment periods of 2 to 4 years. The robust root systems separate cleanly at natural junction points, creating independent plants with established growth potential. Additionally, the abundant flower production provides valuable cut flower harvests that generate supplemental income streams while maintaining ornamental garden value. Rudbeckia, or black-eyed Susan, demonstrates dual multiplication strategies through both systematic division and prolific self-seeding behavior. The fibrous root systems divide easily during spring or fall periods, while simultaneous seed production creates spontaneous new plants throughout garden area. This combination generates controlled divisions plus unexpected bonus plants that accelerate overall multiplication multiplication rates beyond planned propagation schedules. Monarda, known as bee balm, spreads through extensive underground rhizome networks that create numerous division opportunities from single initial plantings. The spreading root systems develop multiple separation points where individual plants can be extracted without disturbing neighboring sections. This rhizomatous growth pattern generates dozens of division possibilities within establishment timeframe, while simultaneously attracting beneficial pollinators that improve overall garden ecosystem health. Sedum varieties offer unique multiplication advantages through both stem-cutting propagation and traditional division methods. These succulent perennials require virtually no ongoing inputs, while providing late-season blooms that extend garden interest periods. The stem-cutting capability enables rapid propagation from existing plants, creating additional multiplication pathways beyond root division alone. Coreopsis, commonly called tick seed, combines easy division with prolific blooming characteristics that provide continuous flower production throughout growing seasons. The clumping growth habit creates natural separation points for division while maintaining compact form that prevents unwanted garden invasion. The abundant flower production attracts beneficial insects while providing cut flower material for indoor arrangements. Echinacea, known as purple coneflower, demonstrates exceptional division potential combined with valuable seed production capabilities. The sturdy root systems divide cleanly while producing seeds that attract beneficial wildlife and create additional propagation opportunities. The deep taproot structure accesses subsoil nutrients, while the crown divisions establish quickly in new locations. Salvia varieties, particularly perennial sage species, multiply effectively through both division and cutting propagation methods. The aromatic foliage provides natural pest deterrent properties, while the extensive root systems improve soil structure through continuous organic matter addition. The flower spikes attract pollinators while providing harvesting opportunities for culinary and medicinal applications. The complete multiplication champion lineup includes Hemerocallis, Rudbeckia, Monarda, Sedum, Coreopsis, Echinacea, and Salvia, each variety capable of substantial multiplication within establishment periods. This geometric expansion transforms initial plant investments into extensive garden systems that generate surplus material for expansion or revenue generation. Commercial propagation operations exploit these multiplication rates to build entire nursery inventories from minimal initial stock investment. Professional growers understand that systematic division scheduling and proper technique implementation can optimize standard multiplication rates through careful timing and handling protocols. The economic mathematics prove compelling when calculating return on investment scenarios. Quality specimens of all 7 varieties require estimated initial investments that can pay for themselves within 3 growing seasons through division value alone, while simultaneously eliminating recurring replacement costs that plague annual gardening approaches. These 7 varieties establish self-sustaining garden ecosystems that provide decades of ornamental value while generating continuous surplus plant production. The biological manufacturing capacity creates wealth accumulation patterns similar to compound interest calculations, where initial investments multiply geometrically over extended time frames. The systematic approach transforms traditional gardening from recurring expense management into strategic infrastructure development that builds appreciating assets. Each variety contributes unique characteristics while maintaining the common thread of exceptional multiplication potential combined with minimal input requirements. The cumulative effect creates garden systems that operate more like perennial production facilities than traditional ornamental landscape, generating measurable returns through systematic biological manufacturing processes that compound annually rather than depleting resources through replacement cycle. Yet the transformation extends far beyond visible plant multiplication into the invisible realm beneath the soil surface. Beneath the surface, perennial root systems construct intricate underground networks that fundamentally alter soil biology through biochemical processes invisible to casual observation. These subterranean infrastructures operate continuously, processing raw soil materials into bioavailable nutrients while establishing symbiotic relationships that span entire garden ecosystems. Annual gardening approaches destroy these complex biological networks yearly through mechanical cultivation and replanting cycles that reset soil development back to basic mineral compositions. The biological transformation begins immediately after perennial establishment, as root systems penetrate soil layers and initiate chemical communication with indigenous microorganisms. Unlike shallow annual roots that extract surface nutrients without contributing biological infrastructure, perennial root networks deposit organic compounds that feed beneficial soil organisms while establishing territorial boundaries through natural secretions that suppress competing plant species. Most gardeners concentrate exclusively on visible plant development while completely ignoring the underground biological revolution occurring beneath their feet. The soil ecosystem transformation determines long-term garden success far more than surface plant appearance, yet remains entirely hidden from casual observation. This biological infrastructure represents the actual foundation of perennial investment returns through systematic soil improvement that compounds annually. Established perennial roots forge partnerships with beneficial fungi that extend nutrient collection capacity far beyond individual root system boundaries. These fungal networks create underground communication and resource distribution systems that connect multiple plants across extensive garden areas. The fungal threads penetrate soil spaces inaccessible to plant roots, while forming nutrient exchange networks that operate like biological internet systems. The partnerships function as biological manufacturing facilities that process soil minerals into plant-available nutrients. Fungal enzymes break down complex organic compounds and mineral deposits that plant roots cannot access independently. In exchange, plants provide carbohydrates and other organic compounds that fuel fungal growth and reproduction cycle. This mutually beneficial relationship increases nutrient uptake efficiency substantially while reducing dependency on artificial fertilizer applications. Deep perennial root systems operate as biological drilling equipment that penetrates compacted soil layers and creates permanent channels for water infiltration and gas exchange. The continuous root presence prevents soil compaction through mechanical pressure distribution, while organic acids secreted by root tips dissolve mineral deposits that cause soil hardening. These biological excavation processes improve soil drainage and aeration without requiring mechanical cultivation. The root architecture functions like underground plumbing systems that direct water movement and storage throughout soil profiles. Taproot varieties create vertical channels that enable deep water penetration during rainfall events, while fibrous root systems spread horizontally to capture surface moisture and prevent erosion. This biological water management eliminates the intensive irrigation requirements that annual gardens demand throughout growing seasons. Continuous root turnover generates steady streams of organic matter as old root segments decompose and release carbon compounds into surrounding soil matrices. This biological composting process occurs constantly as root systems expand and contract through seasonal growth cycle. The organic matter deposition builds soil carbon storage that improves soil structure and water retention capacity year after year. The accumulated organic matter creates habitat and food sources for beneficial bacteria and soil organisms that suppress plant diseases through competitive exclusion and natural antibiotic production. These microscopic biological armies patrol soil environment and attack harmful pathogens before they can establish infections in plant root systems. The biological pest control operates continuously without requiring external chemical interventions. Soil organism populations flourish within established perennial systems as organic matter accumulation creates extensive food webs that support diverse microbial communities. Beneficial bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen into plant-available forms, while other microorganisms decompose organic debris and release mineral nutrients through biological mining processes. These biological factories operate around the clock, processing raw materials into refined plant nutrients. The soil ecosystem development creates self-reinforcing improvement cycles where enhanced microbial activity generates better plant nutrition, which produces healthier plants that deposit more organic matter, which feeds expanded microbial populations. This biological feedback loop accelerates soil development while reducing external input requirements as natural systems become increasingly productive. Research demonstrates that established perennial systems show dramatically higher microbial activity levels, improved water retention capacity, and increased carbon storage compared to annually cultivated systems. The biological measurements reveal quantifiable improvements that continue accumulating as perennial systems mature and expand their underground infrastructure network. These systematic soil improvements create cascading economic benefits as plants perform better each growing season while requiring fewer external inputs. The enhanced soil biology reduces fertilizer requirements, improves drought tolerance, and increases natural pest resistance through biological mechanisms that operate independently of gardener intervention. The soil biology transformation represents hidden infrastructure investment that appreciates continuously through natural biological processes. Like compound interest calculations, the underground biological development generates exponential returns that accelerate the economic advantages of perennial investment strategies. Yet these biological benefits represent only one component of the total financial transformation that occurs when gardeners begin calculating actual return on investment timelines. Commercial growers evaluate perennial investments through rigorous financial analysis that examines initial capital requirements, operational cost reductions, and asset appreciation timelines. This systematic approach reveals why large-scale agricultural operations prioritize permanent plantings over annual replacement cycles that drain resources through recurring expenditures. The mathematics demonstrate clear superiority of infrastructure investment models compared to operational expense approaches that most residential gardeners unconsciously follow. The payback calculation framework incorporates three critical components: initial investment costs, eliminated recurring expenses, and multiplication value generated through systematic division. Each variable contributes specific financial benefits that compound over extended timeframes to create substantial return scenarios. Professional agricultural operations use similar calculation methods to justify infrastructure investments that improve long-term profitability while reducing operational dependencies. Most residential gardeners make planting decisions based on immediate purchase costs rather than analyzing long-term return scenarios that reveal true economic value. This short-sighted approach mirrors consumer purchasing patterns that prioritize upfront affordability over lifetime cost calculations. Commercial operations understand that proper investment analysis requires examining total cost ownership across realistic operational lifespans rather than focusing exclusively on initial capital requirements. Year one requires the fundamental infrastructure investment, establishing quality specimens of the 7 high-multiplication perennial varieties, plus basic soil preparation expenses. This capital expenditure establishes the biological manufacturing foundation that generates future returns through multiplication and input cost reduction. The initial investment period focuses on establishment rather than immediate returns, similar to industrial equipment purchases that require setup periods before productive operation begins. Additionally, year one includes soil preparation costs for optimal establishment conditions. Proper site preparation ensures maximum survival rates and vigorous growth patterns that determine future multiplication success. These preparation expenses function as infrastructure investment that supports long-term productivity rather than recurring operational costs that drain resources annually. Year two demonstrates minimal direct returns as perennial root systems focus energy on establishment and underground infrastructure development. However, input cost reductions begin immediately through decreased watering requirements, reduced fertilization needs, and elimination of annual replacement expenses. These operational savings start accumulating from the first growing season, even while division opportunities remain limited during establishment phases. The reduced input requirements create immediate cash flow improvements that offset initial investment costs. Water consumption drops substantially as deep root systems access moisture sources unavailable to shallow annual plants. Fertilizer applications decrease dramatically through improved nutrient uptake efficiency and soil biology enhancement that occurs naturally within perennial systems. Year 3 delivers the first major payback milestone through division opportunities that generate substantial new plant material while simultaneously eliminating significant annual input costs. This dual benefit structure creates measurable financial returns that justify the initial investment while establishing ongoing wealth generation patterns. The division process transforms single plants into multiple independent specimens that would require substantial investment if purchased individually from commercial nurseries. Each successful division represents direct asset creation that appreciates through continued growth and future subdivision potential. This biological manufacturing process operates continuously without requiring additional capital investment beyond initial establishment costs. How do you calculate the true cost per year of perennial investments versus annual purchases? Divide total investment by useful lifespan, then subtract annual savings from eliminated inputs and division value. This calculation method reveals the actual economic performance of different gardening approaches by incorporating all relevant cost and benefit categories across realistic timeframe. The calculation demonstrates perennial systems achieving dramatically lower annual costs after establishment, while annual systems maintain consistent yearly expenses throughout their operational periods. This cost differential creates increasingly favorable economic outcomes as perennial systems mature and expand their multiplication capabilities. The financial advantage compounds over extended time frames through continued division opportunities and eliminated input costs that accumulate over decades of operation. Each subsequent year amplifies the economic benefits as established perennial systems generate surplus plant material while requiring minimal ongoing investment. Commercial agricultural operations employ similar calculation methodologies to justify infrastructure investments that improve long-term profitability through reduced operational expenses and increased productive capacity. Professional growers understand that systematic financial analysis reveals the superior economics of permanent plantings compared to annual replacement cycles that consume resources without generating appreciating assets. This calculation framework transforms gardening from recreational expense management into strategic investment planning that generates measurable returns through biological asset creation and systematic cost reduction across multiple operational categories. Yet achieving these theoretical returns requires understanding the precise timing and techniques that maximize multiplication success rates. Commercial propagators operate under precise timing protocols that maximize division success rates while maintaining optimal plant establishment percentages throughout their production cycles. Each perennial variety responds to specific seasonal triggers that determine when root systems reach peak division readiness, and understanding these biological windows separates professional operations from amateur attempts that often fail due to improper scheduling. Timing errors devastate multiplication potential by forcing plants through division stress during vulnerable growth phases. A single miscalculation can reduce multiplication rates substantially, transforming profitable propagation schedules into costly plant losses that undermine the entire economic foundation of perennial investment strategies. The precision required mirrors industrial manufacturing processes where timing deviations create cascading quality control failures. Spring division protocols target summer blooming perennials like Rudbeckia and Echinacea when soil temperatures reach consistent levels that trigger active root development. The timing coincides with emerging growth that indicates vigorous metabolic activity while avoiding the energy demands of peak flowering periods. This seasonal window provides maximum growing season duration for establishment before winter dormancy stress tests new root system development. The spring approach capitalizes on natural growth hormones that surge during initial growing season phases. Plants mobilize stored energy reserves for rapid root expansion and crown development that supports aggressive division recovery. The extended growing season duration allows multiple root system establishment cycles before winter stress periods that can damage inadequately developed divisions. Fall division serves spring blooming varieties that benefit from cool weather establishment phases when root development occurs without competing energy demands from active flower production. The cooler temperatures reduce transplant shock while providing adequate time for root system establishment before winter dormancy periods. This timing protocol works particularly well for varieties that concentrate their blooming energy in early growing seasons. Cool weather division reduces water stress and transplant shock that can devastate division success rates during peak summer heat periods. The moderate temperatures allow gradual root system expansion without the extreme energy demand that high temperatures place on newly divided plant materials. Additionally, fall timing provides natural irrigation through increased precipitation that supports establishment without intensive manual watering schedules. The critical success factor involves identifying optimal plant vigor windows that occur after energy accumulation but before peak stress periods like midsummer heat waves or winter dormancy phases. Plants must demonstrate active growth indicators, including new shoot development and expanding crown structures, while maintaining adequate energy reserves for division recovery processes. Division technique execution determines actual multiplication outcomes through systematic root system management and crown separation procedures. The process begins by lifting entire root systems intact to preserve maximum root material while providing clear visibility of natural separation points. Each potential division requires adequate root mass and multiple growing points to establish independently after separation. Professional propagators identify natural crown divisions where root systems naturally separate into distinct sections with established growing points. These biological separation zones minimize cutting damage while ensuring each division contains sufficient root material for independent establishment. The technique requires careful examination to locate optimal separation points that maximize division quantity while maintaining individual plant viability. Root system architecture varies significantly between perennial varieties, requiring species-specific division approaches that accommodate different growth patterns. Clumping varieties like hemerocallis develop distinct crown separations that divide cleanly along natural boundaries. Spreading varieties like monardi require different techniques that separate rhizome sections while maintaining adequate root systems for each division. Each division must include both established root material and viable growing point that enable independent plant development after separation. Inadequate root systems create weak divisions that struggle with establishment, while insufficient growing points limit future expansion potential. Professional technique balances maximum division quantity against individual plant viability to optimize overall multiplication success rates. Hemerocallis and monarda demonstrate exceptional multiplication potential over 5-year periods through systematic division management, while rudbeckia and coreopsis achieve substantial multiplication rates when properly managed through commercial timing protocols. The superior multiplication rates result from aggressive root development patterns combined with natural crown formation tendencies that create abundant division opportunities. Following commercial timing and division techniques consistently doubles or triples multiplication rates compared to casual approaches that ignore biological timing requirements and proper technique implementation. The systematic methodology transforms random plant division attempts into predictable wealth generation processes that operate like biological manufacturing systems. Professional propagation approaches convert gardening maintenance activities into strategic investment management that generates measurable returns through systematic biological asset creation. The precision required elevates perennial division from casual hobby activity into legitimate wealth-building strategies that compound returns through disciplined execution of proven commercial protocols. Yet most gardeners overlook the substantial surplus value these systematic approaches generate. The biological manufacturing processes create valuable plant surplus that most residential gardeners completely waste through uninformed disposal methods or casual gift-giving to neighbors. Established perennial gardens operating under proper division schedules produce dozens to hundreds of excess plants annually, creating inventory that represents substantial monetary assets when properly monetized through strategic sales channels. The surplus generation occurs naturally as multiplication rates exceed typical garden expansion needs. A mature daylily collection might generate 50 divisions annually, while the gardener requires only 10 plants for landscape purposes, creating 40 surplus plants that would cost hundreds of dollars if purchased from commercial nurseries. This biological overproduction represents untapped value streams that can transform gardening from expense management into profitable enterprise. Most gardeners dispose of excess divisions through composting or casual distribution to friends and neighbors, completely missing monetization opportunities that could recover initial investment costs within single growing seasons. The plant material that ends up in compost bins often represents significant potential value that commercial operations would exploit systematically through established sales channels. Local plant sales, farmers markets, and online platforms provide established distribution networks for quality perennial divisions, with particularly strong demand for popular varieties like daylilies, coneflowers, and other proven garden performers. These sales venues eliminate the infrastructure requirements that traditional retail operations demand, while connecting sellers directly with motivated buyers seeking specific plant varieties. Spring plant sales generate concentrated demand as gardeners prepare for growing seasons and seek quality plant material at reasonable pricing. These seasonal events create optimal selling conditions where excess perennial divisions command competitive prices from buyers eager to establish new garden areas or expand existing plantings with proven varieties. Online platforms extend market reach beyond local geographic boundaries while enabling specialized sales of rare or unusual varieties that command higher pricing from collectors and enthusiast gardeners. Digital marketplaces facilitate direct sales relationships that eliminate intermediary markups while providing detailed plant descriptions and growing information that justify competitive pricing strategies. The primary economic benefit comes from eliminating annual plant replacement costs rather than generating substantial revenue streams. The expenditure ranges many gardeners face annually for new plantings creates cumulative costs that perennial systems eliminate entirely through systematic multiplication and establishment. This cost avoidance represents the most reliable financial benefit of perennial investment strategies. Professional quality divisions demonstrate superior establishment characteristics through robust root systems and vigorous growth habits compared to mass-produced nursery stock. The superior plant quality creates customer satisfaction that generates repeat business and referral opportunities that expand sales volume over time when gardeners choose to monetize surplus production. A mature perennial garden operating under systematic division management can generate substantial plant surplus annually while simultaneously providing adequate plant material for continued garden expansion and development. The actual revenue potential depends heavily on local market conditions, available sales channel, and the gardener's willingness to invest time in marketing activities. Cut flower production from perennials like Rudbeckia and Echinacea establishes additional value streams through farmers' market sales during peak growing seasons. The flower harvest provides supplemental opportunities without compromising plant division potential or garden ornamental value, though actual pricing varies significantly based on local market conditions. Diversified approaches combining plant sales with cut flower production maximize earning potential from established perennial investments while spreading market risk across multiple product categories. The combined income streams often provide additional value beyond plant sales alone, while extending selling seasons through continuous flower production schedules. Revenue generation capabilities can reduce effective investment costs substantially within establishment timeframes, while creating ongoing value sources that continue generating returns well beyond the initial savings calculation through systematic cost elimination. The transformation from expense management to value generation converts perennial gardening into legitimate small business opportunities for motivated gardeners willing to implement systematic division schedules. Commercial-scale operations demonstrate the scalability potential where systematic perennial production becomes primary income sources rather than supplemental revenue streams, creating agricultural enterprises built entirely on multiplication-based biological manufacturing processes. The economic mathematics prove compelling when properly calculated, yet achieving these theoretical returns requires understanding the precise implementation methodologies that separate successful perennial investors from casual gardeners who fail to realize the full potential of their biological assets. Proper execution requires systematic planning methodologies that mirror commercial agricultural approaches, where inadequate preparation consistently produces diminished returns across entire operational lifespans. The biological manufacturing systems that generate multiplication benefits depend entirely on proper establishment protocols and risk mitigation strategies that prevent common implementation failures from undermining projected economic outcomes. Investment strategy principles apply directly to perennial gardening through diversification requirements, site analysis, and phased implementation approaches that reduce risk exposure while maximizing return potential. Professional agricultural operations understand that biological investments carry specific risk categories that require systematic management approaches rather than casual maintenance protocols that dominate traditional hobby gardening practices. Enthusiastic gardeners frequently make critical implementation errors that devastate multiplication rates through improper timing, inadequate site preparation, or over-aggressive division schedules that stress plants beyond recovery capacity. These mistakes transform potentially profitable biological investments into expensive failures that require costly replacement efforts and extended recovery periods before productive operations resume. Site selection determines fundamental success parameters through systematic evaluation of sun exposure patterns, drainage characteristics, and soil composition factors that directly influence establishment success rates and long-term multiplication potential. Hemerocallis thrives in full sun to partial shade conditions with well-draining soil, while Monarda requires consistent moisture and benefits from afternoon shade in hot climates. Rudbeckia demonstrates exceptional drought tolerance once established, but requires full sun exposure for optimal flowering and division potential. Echinacea performs best in full sun with well-draining soil and actually benefits from slightly poor soil conditions that prevent excessive vegetative growth at the expense of root development. Sedum varieties require excellent drainage and full sun exposure, making them ideal for challenging sites where other perennials struggle. Coreopsis adapts to various soil conditions, but achieves maximum multiplication rates in full sun with moderate moisture levels. Salvia species generally prefer full sun and well-draining soil, though specific varieties demonstrate varying moisture requirements that affect establishment success and division timing. Matching these specific environmental requirements prevents costly replanting scenarios while ensuring maximum growth vigor that drives division multiplication rates essential for economic returns. Diversification across the 7 multiplication champion varieties provides comprehensive risk protection against weather extremes, pest outbreaks, or market demand fluctuations that could affect individual species performance significantly. This approach functions like financial portfolio diversification, where multiple assets reduce overall risk exposure while maintaining return potential across varying environmental conditions. Weather pattern variations affect different perennial varieties differently, creating natural hedging opportunities when diverse species respond oppositely to identical stress conditions. Drought conditions might suppress Monarda, while Sedum and Echinacea demonstrate enhanced performance under reduced moisture conditions. Similarly, excessive rainfall periods can damage drought-tolerant varieties while benefiting moisture-loving species like Monarda that thrive in higher moisture environments. Phased implementation spreads initial capital requirements across multiple growing seasons while providing learning opportunities that improve technique development before major investment commitments occur. Starting with 2 to 3 varieties enables skill development and site condition evaluation without risking entire investment amounts on unproven implementation approaches. The phased approach allows systematic evaluation of multiplication rates and establishment success under actual site conditions rather than theoretical projections. Early experience reveals soil modification requirements, optimal division timing, and variety-specific care protocols that improve success rates for subsequent phase implementations. Beginning with proven performers like Hemerocallis and Rudbeckia provides reliable establishment success while building confidence for more challenging varieties. Record-keeping systems track division schedules, multiplication rates, and cost savings documentation necessary for verifying actual returns against projected benefits throughout investment periods. Systematic data collection enables optimization of division timing and technique refinement that maximizes multiplication efficiency while identifying underperforming varieties requiring replacement or relocation. Division tracking prevents over-harvesting young plants that require additional establishment time before sustainable division operations begin. Most varieties require 2 to 4 years of establishment before initial division attempts, with subsequent divisions possible every 2 to 3 years, depending on species and growing conditions. Common implementation mistakes include overdividing immature plants, poor seasonal timing that stresses plants during vulnerable periods, and inadequate soil preparation that reduces establishment success rates substantially. Over-aggressive division schedules exhaust plant energy reserves while preventing adequate root system development necessary for continued multiplication capacity. Poor timing coordination with natural growth cycles creates transplant shock and establishment failures that reduce survival rates while eliminating division value completely. Each variety requires species-specific timing protocols that coordinate with optimal energy availability and minimal environmental stress periods. A systematic implementation approach, incorporating proper risk management protocols, transforms theoretical calculations into measurable financial benefits that justify the transition from annual replacement cycles to permanent perennial infrastructure investments. The transformation from consumer dependency toward productive self-sufficiency generates wealth through biological manufacturing systems that operate independently of market fluctuations. This economic shift eliminates recurring expense cycles while building appreciating garden assets that compound returns over decades of operation. These 7 multiplication champions, Hemerocallis, Rudbeckia, Monarda, Sedum, Coreopsis, Echinacea, and Salvia, offer proven pathways to escape annual replacement dependency through systematic division protocols that create exponential plant inventories. Start with Hemerocallis or Rudbeckia. This growing season, master the division timing and techniques through hands-on experience. Then gradually expand your perennial infrastructure to capture the complete economic benefit. Results depend entirely on proper implementation and local growing conditions. But the systematic approach transforms gardening into strategic investment management that generates measurable returns.